All right. Well, thanks for joining in here today. And I know your smiling faces aren't all here, but I get to see your smiling faces when I check afterwards and I see how many views there are, and it's always nice to know that people did join us today. So thanks so much. Feel free, and I hate to say this, kind of feels very YouTubey, but feel free to leave a comment just because it does help me know that people are out there and they're enjoying it, and I do appreciate it. So makes me feel like I'm not just talking to a camera. Anyway, so that in mind. Here we are after Easter, and I wanted to do something that was kind of really a post-Easter series, something that would tie in back into how life is after Easter. We so often get into this deal where Easter happens, and the next thing you know is we're just going to the store buying candy on half-price sales, and we get a great deal on that and Easter decorations, but that's the amount of impact that the Easter season has on us. We go, okay, there's a big party, and then it's just back to life as normal. And really, that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be, okay, well, we had the big party and you go back to normal. The idea is that the resurrection is supposed to be this transformative event, right? It's supposed to be, this is something that changes the way you see the world. It changes the way you act. It changes the way you think. It just, boom, you are somebody different. And we see this very clearly in the stories of the disciples that follow the resurrection. They were weak and timid and all these other things before the resurrection, and they were doubting, and they had this lack of understanding. But after the resurrection, boom, these guys are new people. They are transformed. And among the people transformed by the resurrection is Paul. Now, Paul wasn't one of the disciples. He was quite the opposite to start with, but eventually he's converted. And just to kind of give you an idea of timeline here, Jesus was crucified around 30 AD. Paul is converted about 5 years later in year 35. And in the year 46, he starts his missionary journeys. And where we're going to pick up his missionary journeys is with the book of Corinthians. Because here's what happens is Paul goes out and decides to set up churches, and he sets up this one in the city of Corinth, which is basically the Greek capital of the time. And I don't know if it was the capital, but it was the big city, big trading city, 100,000 people there. It was the place to be in Greece. And so Paul's out there, he gets people on board with the cause, and the book of Corinthians is a letter to that group. So he spent 18 months setting it up. He goes away. He's gone for about 2 years, it seems, and he learns of squabbling. He learns of divisions. He learns of how this group is struggling. And so he writes the book of Corinthians a letter, book, in the year 54, 55, somewhere around there. He writes this book to them saying, you guys, what's the matter with you? You're supposed to be transformed by Christ, but you guys are doing nothing but showing how immature you are. You're just playing your old games, but under a new tune. So you're supposed to be transformed. And he goes through, and it's about 4 or 5 sections where he addresses different areas of places where they need to be transformed. You guys are showing you're not transformed by this and this and this and this. And the one we're talking about this week is divisions, personality conflicts. Now, who among us has had a personality conflict, right? Who among us? Yes, that's right. Raise your hands. Oh, no, not some of you? Yeah, right. No, we've all experienced personality conflicts. It's a real normal thing. And one of the benefits about reading someone like Paul is that his message is really direct. It's not like reading, Moses, for example, and Exodus, where the tie into our life is a bit more remote. We have to do a little more digging. But with Paul, man, it's right there on the surface. You're going to get what you get with Paul. So I think that's as much as I want to say as a setup. But let's get into the reading here. In your order of service, I've got a few selections for you. And we'll take a look. We'll dive in. And you'll get the feel pretty quickly about what he's after here. So here we go. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 10 to 13. He says, I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. My brothers and sisters, some from Chloe's household have informed me that there are quarrels among you. What I mean is this. One of you says, I follow Paul. Another, I follow Apollos. Another, I follow Cephas. Another, I follow Christ. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized in the name of Paul? So he's calling them up saying, hey guys, who are we really belonging to? Isn't that the fundamental question here? Who do you belong to? Do you belong to Christ? Or do you belong to Apollos, Cephas, or Paul, or whoever? And Paul's disavowing it all. He's like, no, look, you don't belong to me. You're not Pauline people. You're supposed to be Christ's people. And he continues, verses 18 to 31 here. He says, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Just, ponder that for a moment. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. So if you're outside the church, you are perishing in Paul's, view. You're not paying attention. And they think the cross is foolishness. But not to us, he says, not to us. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise. The intelligence of the intelligent I will frustrate. Where is the wise person? Where is the teacher of the law? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him. God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Right? I think how many Bible stories, preach that basic idea that the foolishness of God is much wiser than human wisdom, and that the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Right? We did the Gideon series, a few months ago, and that's right. It's all about weakness in our own eyes, but it's power in God's, and that's a theme that just all the way through Scripture. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of the world and despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God, that is, our righteousness, holiness, and redemption. Therefore it is written, let no one boast, but no one who boasts boast in the Lord. You just want to get back to this fundamental question. I think what we're seeing in this first chapter, the fundamental question here is, to whom do you belong? Right? The answer we're supposed to come back to is God. And through all of what Paul is writing here is like, look, you think you're really smart by doing what the world says, or you think you're really strong by doing what the world says. But look, the Lord's made all of that nothing. And if you really believe in Christ, if you really believe in the resurrection, you now see, likewise, that the wisdom of the world is nothing, and that the strength of the world is nothing. Because the strength of the world thought they killed the man, but in fact, he was God and he rose up. It's a very different view. All of the other things in our life that compete for our belonging, right? Think of things that compete to make you say, I belong to this, right? I belong to my work. I belong to my possessions or status or fame, you have dreams, maybe it's something more even simple than that, just TV or Netflix these days, right? Drugs, alcohol, what is it that you belong to? That's the question here. And look, the biblical term for this is just idolatry, right? It's pictured all throughout the Old Testament as, wooden and stone carvings that people, bow down and worship, and God says, no, don't do that. That's all imagery for all these things, work and possession, all these other things. These are the things that compete for us. And when we go into those things, it's having those things as the center of our life. And the idea here is you're supposed to properly order your life, put God in the center, and all the other claimants that have some grab on you can be in their appropriate second, third, or fourth place in life. And so Paul's call here isn't for us to be, robots. He's not trying to say you all have to think the exact same way. He does acknowledge later in these chapters that, unity does not prevent you from being distinctive, right? There's going to be difference in actions, there's a difference in thoughts and difference in words. He gets that. But the uniformity is who we're following, and the uniformity is in how we let that be the ruling thing of our life. So what you've got to see is that whatever differences that there may be, the distinctions in the group, the distinctions in the church are only there to enhance. You're trying to bring your gifts forward, and whatever gifts you have in the construction of the church, that's what you do, right? You empower people to do what they do best and move the cause forward in the way they can. And Christians are united in the idea that we're not perfect, right? That's a fundamental thing for Christianity. And how you interpret that is up to you. Do you think Swedenborg talks about it's not about literally Adam and Eve and a sin that's from them. Swedenborg and the New Church talk about it in terms of, well, there are just things that get passed down from generation to generation, and you have to be able to see that in you. And if you see that, oh, you know what, I am imperfect, I am flawed, and the Lord came back to this world to release me from that, you maybe you're not squabbling so much about who's right and who's wrong, because, well, we all have to be humbly in our place and going, oh, you know what, this is what I'd like to do, but I'm not perfect. Maybe I just need to chill out and be released from having this thing be the center of my life, and I need to acknowledge that the Lord is the center. So that's the general direction Paul is going with all this. But of course, hey, Paul, he doesn't let up. This book is, this letter is 16 chapters long, and we're kind of covering 1 through 4 here today. So let's dig in a little bit further into 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Now this is where he really kind of lays into them and lets them have it and calls them for what they are. He says, this is chapter 3, verses 3 to 9. You are still worldly. Right? You haven't been transformed. You say you're followers of Christ, but you're still worldly. For since there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? Are you not acting like mere humans? For when one says, I follow Paul, and another says, I follow Apollos, are you not mere human beings? What, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants, right? Only servants, through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned each to his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and that they will each be rewarded according to their own labor. For we are co-workers in God's service, and you are God's field, God's building. And he goes on from there and he talks about all the different things you can use to build? Oh, you can use straw and hay to build bricks, and you can use wood, or you can use stone, all these different building materials depending on what you have in your possession. And he's drawing out this analogy saying, like, it's the same way in the church. Whatever you have to build with, use it. Use it. And some of you aren't going to have the same thing, but use what you've got. God's given you a task, and he's like, look, God gave me the task to plant some seeds. Apollos' task is to water it, but God's making it grow. You're going to have to build something too. What do you have to grow? What do you have to plant? What do you have to use? Doesn't matter what it is. It's not about being right and wrong. It's not about saying, you can't be different. It's just whatever you have to use it. That's the simple thing of here. He's like, God's power and God's wisdom, they're going to be what transform the materials you have for building into something. And that's where the real magic is. Don't concern yourself with what you think about wisdom here in a normal way. Think about wisdom in God's point of view. What is God trying to do? He's trying to grow things. So you really have to take a look at these people and go, oh yeah, I guess they're not transformed. He's like, I know that you haven't been transformed. I know you're not thinking in this way because, well, you bicker. I know you're not being post-resurrection people because you're divisive. And you're acting just like ordinary people. That's really the thing here. You're just acting like ordinary people. Are you believing everything that you're being fed on the news about the way the world works? Or are you believing everything that the Lord tells you? That He's in charge, that He's in control, and that good things are going to be brought out of bad things, and He's bringing us all towards a good end? Or are you acting like an ordinary person? Right? That's kind of what Paul is driving at. We have all been called to be something special, to think differently, to see the world differently. Why? Because we saw God come on earth and resurrect, and that nothing that we can do can outdo what God has in plan, what His plans are, right? We can't thwart God's plans. He always gets it His way. So one of the great shames of our life and of churches is, in particular, is where we start squabbling amongst ourselves. And Paul is saying, look, it starts here. It started here in the year 50-something AD. So we don't want to be like that. We want to be like people who are changed. It's about how we hold the Lord and His resurrection as a foundation for our belief. And we like to talk so much about these stories and how they are a metaphor or allegory for our inner process. And look, there's huge amounts of value there. But when one of the things happens in the writings is that Swedenborg actually addresses these chapters in Paul. He doesn't say a lot about it, but when he references it in the book Heaven and Hell. It's number 489. And what he's talking about is basically this idea of if you hold God as the foundation of your life, you see everything differently, which is the main message we've been preaching here all morning here. And so I want to direct you towards Heaven and Hell 489. It's in your order of service. Now look, just so we have an idea here, 489, it's a long number. It's like, in a book, it's like 2.5, 3 pages long. So it's a big, long number, and it's divided into 5 subsections. And the whole theme of it is Swedenborg is writing about here's what happens in the next life when the Lord converts the things that you love into heavenly things. And so he gives some examples of what this is like. And in your order of service, I gave you subsection 5, but I'm going to read to you subsection 3 first. So it's not there just yet. Here's an example of what he's giving about how people in the next life experience heaven. He says, people who have applied the teachings of the church from the Word directly to their lives are in the inmost heaven, and more than anyone else are absorbed in the pleasures of wisdom. They see divine realities in particular objects. They actually do see the objects, but the corresponding divine realities flow directly into their minds and fill them with a sense of blessedness that affects all their sensory functions. As a result, everything they see seems to laugh and play and live. He gives examples, in the same section, and he's talking about how, if you pick up a leaf, you don't just see a leaf, this physical thing. You see, the veins and this and the coloration and all. It's all a reflection of a divine reality. There's something deeper in here. I see the birds and I go, look at how they work. And you think about how your thoughts go, and it's this idea of you're being transformed because everything you see is a manifestation of a spiritual reality. It's the same idea that Paul's talking about, in the sense that everything you see and do is transformed because the Lord rose. And you go, wow, the Lord loves me. The Lord won't let me go. The Lord's not going to let me die. He's coming out to save me. I am transformed because no matter what humans do, there's a wisdom that's greater that can be overcome by God, and He's going to be there. This kind of message is what we're after here today. And in the Heaven and Hell 489, subsection 5, that I have in your order of service, he says, if people have given divine credit for everything and regarded nature as relatively dead, simply subservient to spiritual concerns, and if they convince themselves of this, they are in heavenly light. And everything that presents itself to their eyes derives a kind of translucence from that light. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but you can get the idea that it's a matter of being changed because of how you see the Word and how you see the Lord and how you see it play out in your life, and rearranging your priorities based on that. That's the call post-Easter, right? That is the call. It's not, okay, this happened, back to the way I was doing things because, hey, the Lord saved me. I can do what I want now. It's fantastic. That's not the call. The call is, okay, this has happened. Can you change something? Can you reorient how you see it and put that into practice? Because you might have noticed, the 489, people who applied the teachings of the church from the Word directly to their lives are the ones in the inmost heaven. It's not the ones who know the teachings of the church. It's people who apply the teachings from the Word and put them into practice. Those are the people in the inmost heaven. And I'm sure that's where you would like to go, right? It's the best place, the inmost heaven. So it's not a high bar, really, but it is something you have to do. You have to see things differently. Banish fear, as we said with Moses in the Joshua story. Banish fear. Be strong and of good courage. The Lord is with you. He will not fail you. Isn't that the resurrection? He didn't fail us. He was there. So this is the message here for the next few weeks. It's going to be kind of repetitive in some ways, but we're going to look at some other areas of this story and or areas of this book and see the other things that Paul is calling us to be transformed on. Here it's, don't be divisive. Put Christ at the center. Realize who you belong to. Be humble about yourself. Understand that you've got a sinful nature and that you're trying to overcome it. Be humble about it. Back off. In the next few weeks, we'll see the other bits and areas that Paul is calling for us to be transformed from the resurrection. Amen.